When the trailer for Battlefield 4's 4th chapter Defying the Odds dropped at the beginning of June, just before EA Play, at that point in time, DICE were really starting to get into their stride when it came to content, new features, and quality of life improvements for the game. Then, the first patch of Chapter 4 launched, and everything went backwards 20 paces. Massive bugs were introduced, content was ended up delayed, and game performance tanked as well. What looked to be an extremely promising chapter for Battlefield 5 turned into something of a nightmare for the development team. Today, DICE General Manager Oscar Gabrielson has issued a public apology for what's happened during Chapter 4. On Twitter, Oscar offered the following statement to players. BF community, I know you are frustrated and disappointed with the experience across Chapter 4 for Battlefield 5. I'm really sorry. We're taking a step back to improve the quality of Battlefield 5, and as a result, making needed changes to our roadmap. Ryan covered some of this last week. We're shifting out some content from Chapter 4, and we're stepping back from our 5v5 mode to focus the team on our core Battlefield experience. This was not an easy decision, but the right one to get the game to quality. We hope the work we've put into Battlefront 2 is a testament to our long-term commitment to our games and to our communities. We'll get Battlefield 5 back on track and make it the awesome game you all deserve. We'll provide updates along the way. Thank you for hanging in there. Now, this statement doesn't offer much detail beyond what we already knew to be happening, but it does reinforce that DICE is still focusing on quality as opposed to quantity. Before Chapter 4 started, and indeed after it started, DICE was releasing updates and patches for Battlefield 5 at a staggering rate. They were coming in every 2 to 3 weeks, which is much faster than any previous game in the franchise. This, now very evidently, however, impacted the game in a negative way. It introduced more issues than it did fixes. And then, since the hotfix that had to be hotfixed at the back end of June and July, we have seen a big slowdown in the amount of patches hitting the game. And instead, the team has been consolidating a lot of their work into larger patches, and those are being tested a lot more rigorously. We're still in the early days of this new approach, with only a month or so passing since that change, so progress is hard to really see at this stage, but hearing that continued commitment to providing quality over quantity from the general manager of the studio is one that does give me confidence that DICE isn't just trying to spin this off as some PR move. They're properly serious about getting this game back on track, and that is good news for everybody who's still interested in Battlefield 5. However, this apology is coming quite a long time after the major issues started for Battlefield 5, and the apology really is only for what's happened during Chapter 4. Now, I can look past the absolutely disastrous marketing campaign that this game suffered before the launch, because at that point nobody really knew the game behind the trailers was in such technical trouble. Moving past launch, however, it did become abundantly clear that Battlefield 5 wasn't ready for prime time. And since then, for the past 9 months or so, the community has been consistently met with statements like, "It's coming soon," and "We're working on it." There's only so much of that players will take, and many of them have already had enough. It then doesn't really come as much surprise to me that despite the sincerity of the statement that's been made today by Oscar, that many people aren't taking it seriously. They aren't believing what he's saying, because those people just see this as an extension to the rest of the talk and the rest of the statements that we've been given for the last 9 months. They're beyond listening, they're beyond waiting now, and I think only action on those words is likely to bring them back to the game at this point. Personally, having met a lot of the development team for Battlefield 5 and for previous Battlefield games, having spent time with people like Ryan and Oscar over the past few years, I believe Oscar's statement, because people like Oscar, they are genuine people. They're other people just like you and me at the end of the day. They're not evil, they're not out there to try and dupe you, they're just in a bad situation. And it's a situation that the studio didn't really intend, and certainly individual developers didn't intend for this to happen, in any way, shape or form. The situation, I think, is one created by a culmination of several bad decisions that have spanned quite a few years worth of time. Battlefield 5 didn't suddenly become bad as it launched, or when it was announced to the public. It's very likely this game was in trouble long before anyone outside the studio even knew about it. The amount of articles that you read today from big news outlets that expose issues within development studios, that causes problems for the games that are being made. And so perhaps Battlefield 5 has had similar issues. Game development takes a long time, and planning a release for a video game, picking a window for that game to launch in, that's done years in advance. Companies like EA, they don't just work on day, they work years in advance, and so will many other publishers and developers. They build a roster of games well in advance so they know what's going to be launching over the next few years. Unfortunately for Battlefield 5, it's been one of those games where decisions made a long time ago are really hurting it at the moment. But what I hope for most of all in this situation at the moment, and this goes even beyond Battlefield 5 returning to a good state, I'm talking about the bigger picture here, I hope that the DICE teams and the EA teams who have overall control of this franchise, I hope they learn from this entire situation of what's happened to Battlefield 5. And I really mean that. I really do hope that you learn from what has happened. This isn't the first time that this has happened for a Battlefield game, not even in recent memory. It's still very clear to me what happened with Battlefield 4. In the case of Battlefield 5, the game clearly didn't have sufficient development time before launch, and that greatly impacted the ability of the development team to deliver on their vision. The game was delayed a month, yes, but in the grand scheme of things, that made absolutely no difference. Most of the work scheduled to start for post-launch content, that didn't happen until the game launched, because most of the development team had been pushed onto working base game content because that was still so shaky, and it was still unfinished at that point. Then, once the game launched, there wasn't any post-launch content to fill the live service that this game had been sold on. It was all hands on deck to get the game out in late 2018, no one was left to work on post-launch content, and so we end up with a really bad live service experience. I also think some learnings need to be taken from the mistake to promise such a huge scope of content for Battlefield 5. Besides the core multiplayer experience that we all know and expect from Battlefield games, at the reveal we were told the game would also get a single player campaign, which is now fairly standard, but also a co-op module. And then at EA Play a couple of weeks later, we found out a Battle Royale module was being announced as well. And then, via roadmaps and blog posts, a competitive 5v5 module was also slated to release for this game. The scope of Battlefield 5 was huge, and clearly when you look at how little time it was actually developed in, that scope was never going to be realised, or if it was, and in many cases it did, it was going to have an impact on the quality of that content. And all you've got to do is look at what Combined Arms co-op mode became compared to what it was pitched as at the reveal. There's a clear quality degradation there. There was an idea to make Combined Arms very different from what it was, and by the time it released, it was a very bland, bog-standard co-op experience. Nothing like what was pitched at the reveal. After 2017's disaster with Battlefront 2, DICE really didn't need Battlefield 5 to be the disappointment that it has been. Confidence not only in Battlefield, but within the DICE studio is pretty much at an all-time low when you look at the core community. The people who stick with Battlefield through thick and thin, these are the players that are now greatly annoyed by what's happened. And it's going to be really hard for DICE to get another chance with those players and turn the situation around. The core community doesn't forget these kind of things. They're the biggest fans of the game, and they'll cheer really loudly when things are going well, but they'll also be extremely vocal when things aren't going well. So far, they've been subjected to a very poor release and a very poor live service as well. It's going to be really hard for DICE to get another chance with those players. There's not a lot of trust left there. Moving forwards, like most of you watching this video, I really want to see Oscar's statement today translated into action down the road. Actions speak louder than words. I'm now expecting Battlefield 5 not only to get back to an acceptable standard for a video game, but I'm also expecting it to be awesome, as Oscar says, and I want it to be the kind of game that we expect from the DICE studio. Battlefront 2 is definitely a testament to DICE's long-term commitment to their video games, but at the end of the day, I don't think gamers should have to deal with the kinds of situations that have come out of this studio for the past couple of years. They shouldn't have to deal with overly buggy, messy releases. They shouldn't have to deal with regular broken promises and changes of direction. When you boil it down to the core basics, we play video games to have fun. And right now, some of DICE's games, they're not good fun experiences. I really hope that DICE can deliver that fun aspect that's been missing from Battlefield 5 since it launched. But there you go, thanks for watching, that's my thoughts on the issue, and really what I'd like from this moment forwards is to not have to make another video like this anymore. I am just about done with Battlefield 5's antics, so the fact that Oscar has come out today and made this promise that things are going to get better and the game will be awesome, I really hope that happens. But thanks very much for watching, and I'll catch you guys in another video soon.